Cannabis Cowboys.
In the first 2 episodes of Cannabis Cowboys, we introduced you to the business model behind Juicy Fields, a virtual cannabis company offering massive returns to investors or e-growers around the world. We met some of the company's leading people, and we showed you how this virtual company had created a real buzz on social media and in the cannabis industry itself. Juicy Fields was flying high, and not even the sky, it seemed, could limit their ambitions.
And then they crashed and burned.
I'm Andreas Becker.
I'm Nicolas Martin. This is Cannabis Cowboys.
Cannabis Cowboys.
A story about big dreams,
Juicy money,
and never-ending hype. Brought to you by DW.
Episode 3, Up in Smoke. Do you remember Martin? Martin started out as an ordinary investor in Juicy Fields and then worked for them as one of their influencers. He promoted their business on social media to attract new investors and new money. In episode 1 of Cannabis Cowboys, Martin told us that thanks to Juicy Fields, he gave up his regular job and traveled the world with his family.
Der beste Monat, den ich hatte, waren 71.000 Euro im Monat und das waren nur die Provisionen.
In my best month, I made 71,000 euros just in commissions. On top of that came the profits from my own investments on the platform. All in all, I earned roughly 80,000 euros in my best month.
Kann man sagen, 80.000 Euro habe ich im besten Monat verdient.
In mid-July 2022, Martin and his family were back home in Germany. By that time, Martin had convinced almost 2,000 people to invest in Juicy Fields. Martin estimated their combined investments amounted to almost 10 million euros. So he was flying high with Juicy Fields.
But there was something in the air, and the investors were getting nervous. On Wednesday, July 13th, 2022, Martin had a Zoom call with his investors. He had expected a good turnout, but was overwhelmed by the response.
Ich habe einen Raum für 1.000 Leute geöffnet.
I had opened a room for 1,000 people, but there were an additional 400 people in the waiting room. I couldn't let them in because I didn't have enough capacity. I had not expected that many people.
Ich hatte auch nicht damit gerechnet.
The video conference platform limits the number of people who can take part in a call. But even with a room for 1,000 people, Martin felt like he had underestimated just how nervous his investors had got. Germany's financial industry watchdog BaFin had raised concerns which remained unresolved. In fact, BaFin's concerns had grown.
BaFin had ruled that unless Juicy Fields submitted a prospectus, an obligatory yet standard declaration on a company's structure and business model, Juicy Fields would not be allowed to continue to trade in Germany. So at first, Juicy Fields had been banned from recruiting any new investors in Germany. And now it was being banned from offering its virtual cannabis plants at all.
The thing is that despite these bans, we had been able to open a new account and buy a new plant from within Germany. Juicy Fields, it seemed, was ignoring BaFin's demands. We talked about that in the second episode. But we weren't the only ones to have noticed. BaFin saw it too. And they stepped up their game. On July 7th, 2022, BaFin slapped Juicy Fields with a hefty fine of 1 million euros.
There were other reasons why Juicy Fields investors were getting nervous. At the end of May, the company announced it had a new boss.
Money, green. Started with a dream.
Alan Glantz, the company's CEO, who was prominent in music videos and Juicy Fields promos, had stepped down. The new boss was a cannabis entrepreneur from South Africa, Willie van der Merwe. In a Juicy Fields newsletter, he said he wanted to take the company to a new level.
But van der Merwe and his plans faced resistance within the company. On July 13th, the day that Martin had his Zoom call, investors received this unexpected and rather alarming email. We've had one of our producers voice it for this podcast.
This is to bring to the attention of all members that remaining staff has decided to go on strike on July 13th, 2022. We had to take this decision due to continuous and constant disputes between the team and management.
The email was signed not by individual names, but by departments. The teams in charge of IT, customer support, and payments at Juicy Fields.
A few investors had been having problems and delays withdrawing funds from the platform.
On the messenger service Telegram, some of the Juicy Fields groups suddenly disappeared. And in the remaining groups, the mood ranged from desperation to rage.
I'm trying to withdraw and it's disabled.
What the is happening?
The web is down.
Man, this is finished. It is over.
So Martin's job during his call with investors on July 13th was clear. He had to calm them down and allay their fears. And he should spread some optimism by announcing that Juicy Fields would soon launch a better, more stable version of its platform.
Uns hat das Management halt nur mit der Information gefüttert, dass
We were told by the management that a Juicy Fields 2.0 was about to launch. In our calls with potential investors, we were supposed to talk about it and tell them there was nothing to worry about.
Und die Leute ein bisschen zu beruhigen.
The call went okay, and the day after, Martin was on his way to the airport to fly to Berlin. 2 big cannabis events were about to take place in the German capital. The Consumer Fair, Mary Jane, and another business conference a few days later. Juicy Fields, you might have guessed, was a sponsor for both events. Martin wanted to meet up with the Juicy Fields management. At least, that was his plan.
Kurz nach dem Check-in habe ich dann gemerkt, dass mich Leute angeschrieben haben, hey, das
Soon after I had checked in, I saw messages from people saying they couldn't access the Juicy Fields website. And by the time I'd got to Berlin, I could see for myself that something was wrong. It was impossible to log in, and lots of people were angry and worried. What was going on? Was it because of the Juicy Fields 2.0 launch?
Ist das wegen Juicy Fields 2.0?
July 14th was the last day that Juicy Fields e-growers got to see their virtual plants. We also had an account, remember?
And whenever we tried to log in to the platform, the system said, access denied.
That same day, all content on Juicy Fields' social media accounts on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Telegram disappeared. So people set up new groups on Telegram and elsewhere to share their stories.
I lost 3,000 euros.
I've lost 20K.
I lost a lot of money myself, but even worse is that I encouraged my own son to invest in Juicy Fields.
Meanwhile, Martin's phone erupted. He says he got 5,000 messages in just a few days.
Ich habe massenweise Bedrohungen bekommen übers Internet.
I received tons of threats via the internet and very unpleasant gifts and pics. People holding knives, people pointing guns at me, or sending pics with guns.
Wo Leute eine Pistole auf mich zeigen.
Martin says these threats were not limited to messages and photos.
Ist auch jemand zu mir nach Hause gekommen, hat meine Frau bedroht.
The very next day, somebody showed up at my house. He threatened my wife. He told the whole neighborhood that I was involved with Juicy Fields and that he wanted his money back. That was super stressful. I was in Berlin and my wife was home alone with our 3 kids. And I didn't know what would happen next and what kinds of ideas people would get.
Für Wellen schlagen wird und ob andere Leute dann noch auf die Gedanken kommen.
So Martin left Berlin to rush back home. He grabbed his wife and kids and took them away to a camping site for 2 weeks, hoping that things will cool down.
Man weiß nicht genau, wie die Leute ticken, wie die drauf sind.
You never know what people are capable of. It all felt so surreal, like being in a gangster movie.
Als wäre man in so einem Gangsterfilm drinne.
Martin is not the only one who says the experience reminded him of gangster movies.
Das ist ein Klassiker, ein filmreifes.
This really could be the script for a movie or a Netflix series or documentary. Juicy Fields and the Drug Lords or something like that.
Drogenbarone oder sonstiges.
That was Eddie from episode 1. He had invited us to his home, where we saw his virtual greenhouse online while his girlfriend played with their little daughter in the next room. Together, they had 80,000 euros in their Juicy Fields account. But like all the other investors, they lost access to their money on July 14th, 2022.
Eddie also had a webmaster or influencer at JuicyFields, like Martin, a person who made inspirational videos and hosted Zoom calls for investors. Eddie's webmaster was not Martin, but a different guy. A guy who did what Martin did: calm down investors, talk about the coming changes on the platform, tell them everything would be all right. Eddie had even had a personal Zoom call with him a few weeks before that fateful July 14th.
Ich meine, keine Ahnung, ob er da schon was gewusst hat. Also,
I really don't know if back then he already knew something would happen. I had the impression he was really nice. He seemed authentic and sincere. Either I'm not good at judging people's characters, or this guy didn't know what would happen either.
Also entweder habe ich so eine schlechte Menschenkenntnis oder er wusste genauso wenig davon.
But Eddie was not angry at his webmaster.
Böse ihm persönlich nicht. Weil meiner Meinung nach,
I'm not mad at him personally. I don't think he was the one pulling the strings. That was somebody much higher up. If I'm mad, then maybe at myself. I should have paid out more of my profits earlier instead of reinvesting most of it. I guess I just wanted a bit too much.
Vielleicht wollte ich da noch einen Tick zu viel.
Not everybody was as calm and rational as Eddie. In fact, most of the JuicyFields investors were the exact opposite.
While Martin was hiding out at a camping ground, things did not cool down. As more and more people realized that they had been blocked from accessing their accounts and their money, some called in the police or contacted their lawyers.
I was early and I reinvest a lot. I had 350,000 euros in the account. That's like the amount I lost.
That was Daniel Johansson, an investor based in Sweden. He has let us use his real name. The amount of money Johansson put into JuicyFields was way higher than average. But it is an indication of how attractive the system seemed for some investors. Johansson became an e-grower almost right after the company started in 2020.
Well, I got the link from a friend. So when I saw JuicyFields, I immediately started believing in it fully. I might have needed to do more research now when I look back. But I believed in it so much I didn't even really look into it closely. First, I just wanted to see how it worked, and I got my harvest, and it was a lot of fun, the whole thing. And I started putting in more and more, and then I filled my account.
The platform limited the number of virtual plants each e-grower could have. The most popular plant, the 50 euros Juicy Flash, was limited to 1,000 plants per account. When Johansson filled up his account, he started to open new ones for his family.
Then I filled my father's account, then I filled my sister's account, and so on. And I also told friends.
Johansson told us that his encouraging friends and family to invest in JuicyFields causes him more pain than his own losses. When he realized that the money was gone, he started a podcast and contacted a lawyer to help him and others.
I kind of turned it into fire or my anger and needed to do something, And since then we started this case, and I have got so much appreciation from people for actually doing something that can fix the whole thing.
Johansson asked a lawyer called Lars Olofsson to look into his case. And Olofsson quickly formed an opinion.
From my point of view, everything was very, very clear. This was a scam from day one. No matter what people have been saying, it has all the trademarks.
We're still looking into whether it was a scam from day one, and we'll explore and share our evidence with you later. When Johansson's lawyer, Olofsson, announced that he would fight for the interest of JuicyFields investors, he got requests from potential clients and claimants around the world.
It's definitely a worldwide scam. I have clients in the US, I have clients in South America, in Argentina and in Peru. I have clients in New Zealand, Australia, Vietnam, China, Indonesia, and one gentleman from India. But the majority of my clients are from Europe.
Olofsson says more than 60 countries could be involved or affected. Most of his clients come from Mexico and Germany. The number of clients for his class action lawsuit quickly approached 800.
Do you think for some of them the loss has been dramatic?
Oh, yes. It's catastrophe. I would say a third of my clients have invested everything they have. Juicy Fields has taken these investors to the cleaners, so to say.
4 days after investors got blocked from their accounts, on July 18th, we traveled to Berlin for the International Cannabis Business Conference, ICBC for short. It was organized by the same team that hosted the Cannabis Conference in Barcelona, which we visited earlier.
Our trip was scheduled long before the Juicy Fields platform went dead. We had planned to talk to the new CEO of Juicy Fields, Willie van der Merwe, and follow up with the people we had met in Barcelona. But in Berlin, there was no trace of Juicy Fields at all. No people, no booth, no Lamborghinis, no party, not even a company logo anywhere.
The ICBC catalog was particularly interesting. In Barcelona, it was a colorful and glossy brochure with articles and information about the conference sessions, speakers, and participating companies, plus, of course, advertising. In Berlin, there was no brochure to speak of, only a bunch of black and white photocopies stapled together. And there was no reference to Juicy Fields at all. So we talked to Alex Rogers, the boss of the International Cannabis Business Conference. Juicy Fields, it was a big sponsor of this event, no?
Yeah, well, they're not a sponsor anymore, of reasons I won't disclose personally, but maybe people can figure that out.
Rogers' reluctance to disclose any more details made us wonder about the question of responsibility. Should conference organizers be more careful before accepting money from sponsors? But Rogers kind of dodged that question too.
Here's the deal. How do you vet a business when you have a conference? So in any business, you'll find players who are shady. I'm sure in the banking industry and the finance industry of Germany and elsewhere, you find things that go down that are probably whatever Juicy Fields did, which I don't know, but I'm sure it was small time compared to what some of these big multinational companies are doing to us every day.
For you as an organizer of the whole thing, it is not hurting if you lose a sponsor like this?
That's really no one's business but mine.
Were you surprised when this happened? I heard about it like Monday.
Yeah, it's an abrupt thing. So every time something like that happens, it's a bit of controversy, but it'll be blown over in a month and nobody will ever remember it because this industry is so strong otherwise. To concentrate on one bad player is misrepresenting the industry as a whole.
Rogers organizes cannabis conferences for a living. So you can see why he might want the industry to forget about, as he put it, bad players. The cannabis industry has struggled with its reputation since the beginning. Many people still think it's full of potheads, bongs, and criminals. That reputation is changing, but it's changing very slowly. So scandals and scams are the last thing the industry wants. In terms of the industry's reputation, the Juicy Fields case is a nightmare.
For us as reporters, the events around July 14th also raised some uncomfortable questions. Sure, it looked like our instincts were right. Something was clearly strange about Juicy Fields, and we were beginning to think this could be a scam of epic proportions. But we wondered if we had been too slow with our investigation. Should we have published our evidence earlier to warn investors?
We had decided not to. Because despite our suspicions about the Juicy Fields business model, we were still in the middle of our research. Plus, before July 14th, we had no indications to suggest that people had lost money unfairly or through any fraud.
Now there were tons of victims, but no signs of any perpetrators. As we visited that conference in Berlin, our part in this story as observers and investigative journalists troubled us.
We're here now, a week after the scam exploded, let's say, or was discovered. So since then, everybody is kind of running around like headless chickens. Everybody's nervous. Nobody wants to be seen as having ties with them.
Emotionally, for you, what do you think now that the whole thing somehow exploded? I mean, we were working on that story quite some time.
Yeah, it feels strange in two different ways. One is like the feeling of vindication, like, yeah, we were right. It got to be a scam, but now we got victims for the first time. At the same time, it's kind of weird what is happening from representatives of the company. They're all publishing letters saying they have never had anything to do with the scam. They're all pointing fingers to each other. So it's a bit mysterious.
It was surreal. After July 14th, Juicy Fields' most prominent figures claimed they had nothing to do with what was happening. The new CEO stepped back after just 1 month in office, and the old CEO, Alan Glantz, said that he and his team were innocent. That's when finally we were able to reach Glantz on WhatsApp.
100% the team of the company, innocent, the same I am.
Do you have the feeling you were used by somebody in the background?
Right now, I think so, yes. I mean, the people use me.
Daniel Gauci also said that he was innocent. Gauci was head of business development and a spokesperson of Juicy Fields. Remember, we had heard from him in the second episode. After July 14th, he published a statement. Here's an excerpt read by one of our producers.
It's clear that there have been lies, and a lot of people, including myself, have been manipulated and misled.
Everyone was claiming victimhood, except perhaps Svesta Lauric, who promoted Juicy Fields in the Spanish-speaking world and now made a public apology to all investors.
I'm really sorry, guys. I don't know what's going on and what's happening here. I'm really sorry, Mom, Dad, my friends, and all of you. I'm really sorry, guys.
But how much money was lost exactly? There are few facts and lots of speculations, especially in online forums. Could the Juicy Fields case become as big as the OneCoin scam?
OneCoin was a fake cryptocurrency back in 2014. According to US prosecutors, the OneCoin scheme brought in $4 billion worldwide.
As for Juicy Fields, it's still too early to assess the damage, even now as we record this.
Lars Olofsson, the Swedish lawyer we heard earlier and who says he represents hundreds of people in dozens of countries, has made calculations of his own.
On average, my clients has lost 31,700 euros. 25% of my clients has lost more than 50,000 euros.
Juicy Fields claimed that more than 500,000 people had signed up on their platform to become e-growers. Olofsson's estimates are more conservative, but just as shocking. He says that if only 125,000 people bought plants and they each spent half as much as his clients did, the damage would still run into the billions.
If I'm adding up 125,000 and how much on an average people has lost, now my estimate is that between 1.5 and 2 billion euros. That is what has been lost. If there are 500,000, I suppose you have to recalculate.
Again, these are all rough estimates, not reliable calculations. It's too early to assess the total damage, as we've said, and it's unclear whether we ever will get a full picture. Because in scams like these, many people do not report their losses to the authorities. Some people simply don't believe there's a chance they will get their money back. And some feel too ashamed, too embarrassed to be seen as greedy or stupid or both.
But a sense of shame was not limited to those people who lost money. Take Martin, Juicy Fields' successful promoter. His job as an influencer was to get others to invest in the platform. Among them were family, his mother, his brother, and friends.
Ja, die Schuldgefühle kommen immer wieder hoch.
These feelings of guilt haunt me. Every time I talk to people that I recruited to invest, every time I chat with them online or do a Zoom call, the feelings of guilt come back.
Also jedes Mal, wenn man mit irgendjemandem schreibt oder zoomt.
But Martin freely admits that for him, the whole venture was profitable.
Alles in allem bin ich da mit einem sehr, sehr großen Plus rausgegangen.
All in all, I made a very, very big profit. I don't want to say that too loudly because a lot of people could get very angry at me. But I did walk away with big gains.
Aber ich bin mit einem sehr großen Plus rausgegangen.
Martin says he used his own money to pay back his most recent recruits, those who had invested money just before the platform became inaccessible, because he felt bad for them. But somehow, and this is the strange thing, Martin still doesn't fully believe that all that money invested is really gone. When we last spoke, he told us that he was still trying to log into his virtual greenhouse every day.
Ja, zu 99% glaube ich jetzt dran, dass es Scam ist.
I'm 99% sure that this was a scam, but this 1% of hope does remain, and I really can't help that. And as long as this hope is there, I cling to it.
Solange es eine Hoffnung gibt, klammere ich mich auch noch ein bisschen daran.
Martin is not the only person who's hoping against hope. Lots of people refuse to accept that they've been fooled. Maybe this capacity for hope against hope is what made them believe in Juicy Fields in the first place. And here's another strange thing. From time to time, there are signals from Juicy Fields itself, and some people see that as a reason for hope.
You heard right. Juicy Fields is still sending out signals. The company's most public figures have distanced themselves and claim they are innocent. Other people linked to Juicy Fields have disappeared. But the company's website is still online. And from time to time, it announces that a Juicy Fields 2.0 is just about to launch.
How is that possible, you may wonder? And we wonder too. And that is what we are going to try and find out in the next episodes of Cannabis Cowboys. First, we'll be looking for weed. Because if we find the weed and follow it, we might just find who's behind all this.
But if there is no weed, we think it's clear that Juicy Fields was a Ponzi from day one. A scam with all these investors buying a virtual product, but in reality, there was never any product to sell. So join us on the next episode of Cannabis Cowboys when we ask, where is the weed? Cannabis Cowboys is a DW production, researched, written and presented by us,
Andreas Becker
and Nicolas Martin.
Our editor was Zulfikar Abani.
Audio editing and mixing by Simon Berghahn. Sound design, Warner Poland.
The executive producer was Judith Hartl.
Special thanks to Connor Dillon, Gabriel Borrett, Jennifer Collins, Charlie Shield, Nick Martin, Rob Much, Ineke Mules, Sam Baker, and thanks also to Daniel Johansson and the Juicy Fields Case podcast.
Additional thanks to Henrik Böhme, Thomas Neufeld, and the whole DW business team.
The cover was designed by Ilona Wendt and Nora Charlotte Tom. If you read about Cannabis Cowboys in a podcast newsletter, that's thanks to Sam Baker.
Boran Oeser took care of our promotion on social media and Christian Kühne of our distribution.
Legal advice, Tobias Würkert and Thomas Gardemann. If you'd like to send us comments and feedback, send us an email to cannabiscowboys@dw.com.
And we are constantly looking for new leads in this story, so if you have any information regarding Juicy Fields, we would be grateful for your help. Get in touch and send us an email to cannabiscowboys@dw.com.
If you like this podcast, hit subscribe, tell your friends, and leave us a comment on your favorite podcast platform.
Thanks for listening.